why does there exist a stigma within the African American community as it relates to mental health? Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning into my channel. It's Manika. As some of you may or may not know, the month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're going to be continuing with our videos for the month of May to help break down the stigma around mental health within the African American community. So before I delve too deeply into symptoms and diagnoses and what criteria you can meet for a diagnosis, I really wanted to touch on this reason as to why there exists a stigma within the community, and I wanted to root and ground that within a cultural context and have a cultural conversation about that. So if there's anything that you want to add to this video, please feel free to leave comments in the comment section. And if you haven't watched my previous video, I'll also leave a link to that. So stigma within mental health. I think that it's very important that when we have these conversations that, again, we root it in a cultural context, because the reasons why people within the dominant society might have a stigma around mental health are totally different as to the reasons why we as African Americans have a stigma around mental health. And I think it's really important to point those differences out. One thing to point out too is that when you look at the research and the studies that have been done around this, African Americans tend to be very open about the fact that they're struggling with things. We're pretty open with each other in terms of if we're feeling anxious about something, or if we're depressed, or if we're sad. But what we don't tend to do is seek out therapy or talk to a counselor. We tend to handle things on our own within our own communities or within a church body or a congregation where we're having people pray for us or pray over us to help deal with some of the difficulties that we're having. So there are three reasons that I wanted to point out. These are not all inclusive. There are a lot of reasons, but again, just looking from a cultural context, these are three reasons why I think that it's important to ground this conversation about stigma within that particular context. So first, we will define what exactly is a stigma. So a stigma is a negative belief that can be associated with an individual or a group. And that negative belief can cause dishonor, disgrace for a particular person or for a particular group. It can also cause shame because of this particular belief. So all of those things are kind of centered around this conversation of mental health within our community. But the question then becomes why? What has happened to us as a people, or what has transpired historically that has caused this negative belief or this stigma around mental health for us within the community? And the three reasons that I want to point out is, one, I think the first thing to really keep in mind when we're having this conversation is diagnoses in mental health and the entire psychiatric community is all based on what is normal and what is not. And what's normal is a social construct. People define what is normal. In our particular case, there were Caucasians or the dominant society who was defining what normal was. And when they were defining themselves as normal and their behaviors as normal, then that means because of our particular state within the community, we were defined as abnormal. So I think, one, the first thing that we have to keep in mind is this whole idea of normal. Who defines what is normal and who defines what is abnormal? And how did we as enslaved Africans and African Americans fit within those definitions and within those constructs? So just thinking about it from that perspective, there's already this inherent bias towards African Americans as it relates to what we did and how we thought and how we looked. Secondly, it kind of segues into my second point is our historical trauma. I don't think that you can negate the fact that there were institutions that were set up that were designed for our enslavement to dehumanize us, and because of those systems and because of those structures, we developed an inherent distrust for medical professionals and doctors in general. So I don't know about you, but if I was down south and I had to be treated at Lynchburg Hospital, I don't think that I would have been going to the hospital very often. Our culture, our norms, and our values were ripped from us. So what kind of psyche, what kind of mentality and mindset develops in a group of people who have been taken away from everything that they know to be normal? When you have to then develop the norms and culture and values of the dominant society and abandon everything that was true and normal for you. And even if you look at historical accounts, you'll see that when African Americans wanted to laugh, they had to laugh inside of a barrel. So even normal human expressions, we weren't able to exhibit in public. So you have to again think about what that does to our psyche when we're not by law even able to emote and express ourselves and be who we are and live out our lives in very humane and natural ways. Even when you think about our spiritual context and the way in which we defined ourselves culturally, the way that our families were organized, our norms, the things that we did to heal ourselves, our traditional spiritual systems and customs, all of those things were deemed to be abnormal within the society. So, one of the processes that I think when people come to therapy and are choosing to do it from a very Afrocentric perspective, one of the things that I try to do is think about the process of how can we begin to decolonize our minds. So we have to begin to deconstruct all of those things because not only does it have a negative impact on our mental and psychological development, it also has a negative impact on our physical well being. So, when you begin to look at the research, you'll see that um, if you are having issues mentally, then sometimes those mental issues can translate into difficulties with your body. So depression not only makes you want to get out of not want to get out of bed, but it can also cause your body to ache. It can cause back aches. It can cause stomach pain. So you can have very real physical symptoms just because of your mental state. And we're seeing that a lot in the research. And what the research is telling us is that because our mental health and our mental well-being, because we're not taking care of that adequately, that's contributing to our high blood pressure, our hypertension, our diabetes, and all of these other health disparities. So, what you see some cultures doing, their culture and their norms or values are beginning to be used as a buffer between those stressors that we have in life, all of those things that we go through, those microaggressions, the depression that we're experiencing, the grieving and the loss. They're creating culturally specific interventions to help deal with those negative life outcomes and negative psychological disparities that they're seeing within their community. And I think the same thing has to be very true for us. So, again, that historical trauma is something that I believe contributes to the way in which we view and see mental health. And lastly, I kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think the fact that the medical profession, psychiatry in general, was used as a tool for our oppression. If you read the work of Dr. Joy Degruy in her book Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome, you see that she talks about that in her work. If you read the work of Amos Wilson, you'll see that he talks about that as well. So you have all of these institutions and systems that were used for tools to use as tools to oppress us and to dehumanize us and to label us in certain ways that weren't true to who we are and who we were as a people. So you take all of those three things together, and I think you have a recipe for a group of people who do have negative ideologies and negative thoughts about what it means to seek out mental health treatment. But one of the things that we have to begin to do as a community is, again, be proactive about creating culturally based interventions that people feel comfortable coming to us with and knowing that they're receiving treatment from professionals who understand all of these microaggressions and life experiences that they might be going through. Because another one of the reasons why African Americans said that they don't go to treatment or therapy is because they don't want to sit across from someone who's being judgmental, who doesn't understand the struggle and the life of an African American, or who has some sort of perceived privilege that keeps African Americans from connecting to that particular therapist. So those are my three reasons why I think that there's a stigma around mental health. If you have differing views or opinions as to why you think, please leave those in the comment section. If you would like to be updated about other videos that I'm going to be making, please subscribe to my channel or you can click the notifications link. And again, we will be making more videos, so we hope to connect with you then. And as always, be well.